Welcome to the Orlando Sentinel's editorial board interview with the candidates in the Republican primary for the 9th Judicial Circuit State Attorney's Office. That covers Orange and Osceola counties. With me today are Julie Anderson, our editor-in-chief, and Viewpoints editor Jay Reddick. We have what is an unusual race in many ways. The winner of the August 30th GOP primary will advance to a three-way matchup in November against former state attorney Monique Worrell, a Democrat whom Governor Ron DeSantis suspended earlier this year, and the man appointed by the governor to take over the office, former Judge Andrew Bain, who has filed to run for office with no listed party affiliation, which is also unusual. But today we have the two GOP candidates. Thomas Feiter and Seth Hyman are both former assistant state attorneys who now operate their own law firms and have been doing so for quite some time. During this interview, we will be asking them questions about the policies that they intend to enact if elected state attorney and what voters can expect. They have both agreed that to focus their answers on that rather than debating over each other's qualifications. And I'm going to dive right in with the first question and something that I think any state attorney would identify as one of, if not their biggest challenges: hiring and keeping enough attorneys to handle the heavy workload of the Ninth Circuit office. Annual turnover is right now supposed to be somewhere around 20%, despite some modest raises. What would you do differently to recruit and train new attorneys? And what steps would you take to hold on to them? Mr. Hyman, can we start with you?
So it is essential to retain good quality folks and attract very highly qualified assistant state attorneys. Now, under the administration of Hermes Ayala and the administration of Monique Worrell, we saw a huge turnover, much, much higher than in the past. And that's because they ran on platforms effectively of non-prosecution. And the folks that want to be prosecutors want to serve their community. They want to protect victims and they want to keep the community safe. So we saw many, many qualified prosecutors quit that office over the period of the last 8 years or so and go work in neighboring prosecutors' offices from Lake County to Volusia to Brevard to Polk. And that's a major issue. Keeping the younger attorneys and attracting younger ASAs has a lot to do with training. Many, many ASAs will say that the training regimen in that office pretty much forever has been inadequate. And a lot of times, basically someone is hired, they're given a docket of files and thrown in the deep end, and they just show up in court and try to figure it out. That is no way, no business would run that way, and the state attorney's office shouldn't run that way. Every single training should be focused on how to prove the most commonly appearing crimes, not ancillary, small little issues. That's typically what's happened. Trainings have to be much more frequent, and law enforcement needs to be invited into those trainings because police officers execute the laws on the streets, and they often have questions of ASAs when they do something that's not right on the law, and they want those questions answered. So if the state attorney plays a role in training police officers in criminal law, that will lead to stronger cases, on strong cases that will lead to stronger cases, and weak cases won't result in an unnecessary arrest.
Thank you. Mr. Feiter, same question.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. If I could start by just answering that, my name is Tom Feiter, and my goal in running for state attorney is to put safety first in our community. I'm running because I'm the most qualified to lead this office, but also because I'm dedicated to keeping our community safe and making sure it's a great place for us all to live, work, and raise our families. But to answer your question, Ms. Fluker, you asked about what we would do to keep and retain quality attorneys. I have experience in this because I have here at my law firm 18 employees. I don't believe Mr. Hyman has any employees working for him. So I had firsthand experience in training, retaining, and keeping happy attorneys and people that work for me. In addition to having 18 employees here at the firm, I still serve in the United States Army JAG Corps Reserve, where I am responsible for 16 soldiers. And we actually have to kind of recruit as well there to find good soldiers, good attorneys to work with military clients as well. So one of the ways we attract quality people is to create a positive culture. And that's something that I want to talk about. I know I have about 2 minutes here. I'm going to try to stay within my time constraints. But I think there needs to be a shift in culture at the state attorney's office. Right now, it appears that our younger attorneys think that the way to get ahead is by knowing the right people and getting on their good graces. And that's not how I intend to lead. I think that turns a lot of the best people off, and we need to put an end to that. I don't believe that, you have to kiss the right ring to get the right job. I believe in earning your position through honest, hard work. That's what built this country, and I intend to demonstrate that to our prosecutors by example, and for all the support team as well. Training is important, but so is empowering prosecutors who have sufficient experience. And one of the ways we'll do that is by developing a guiding coalition who can set the proper example. And when we lead with the proper example, that will want to keep people here, and that will make our office more competitive and better able to achieve its mission.
Thank you. And actually, that kind of leads into another question that I had. Criminal courts are classically seen as adversarial situations. But the reality is that when you get the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, the judges, the clerks, other courtroom personnel, often law enforcement together, they come to see themselves as a work group. And that can really increase courtroom efficiency, but it can also lead to situations where the individual facts of some cases become overshadowed, and you run the risk of even unjust outcomes. As state attorney, how would you assure that none of your assistant state attorneys cross a line that shouldn't be crossed in the name of maintaining those work relationships? And let's start with Mr. Feiter.
Of course. Leadership by example, Ms. Fluker, is what I intend to do. One of the things I wanted to do when I became an attorney was I watched the Jedi Masters, right? These really great lawyers who came in and they just commanded the courtroom. And I watched how did they do that? And one of the things they did was they became board certified in criminal trial law. And that means that lawyers and judges have to peer evaluate those lawyers. So I became board certified, which is a really high standard to meet, and it's hard to pass that exam. So it makes me a subject matter expert in criminal trial law. So leadership by example, showing the attorneys, not only the prosecutors that work in the office, but also the public defenders, being respectful to the clerks and being respectful to the defendants. Remember, it's not us against them. These are our citizens. It's not a game. And we should never deploy gamesmanship-like tactics to win. Sometimes, when you lose, you really win. And sometimes when you win, you really lose. And I know that there's been some information on Mr. Hyman about how he's engaged in that and how he's led by the wrong example. And I think that's wrong. I think we need to set a better example for the young prosecutors and the young public defenders, and show the judges that we respect them as well, that we value their input. So it does hurt the ability of the courts to function efficiently when our reputation is soured by allegations and referrals to professionalism boards like Mr. Hyman has done in the past. And he has not only lost the confidence of the state attorney, but also the office of the public defender and the judiciary, all questioning his morals and his values. And I see him smiling over there and smirking, and I don't think it's funny at all. When you're a prosecutor, this is a very serious job, and I expect to be held to the highest of standards, and I will set the example by leading the way.
Okay, and we did ask you not to really address your opponents, but to address the questions that we're asking. But Mr. Hyman, I do think that you deserve a chance to respond to that, and then go on to talk about the question that we've asked. Thank you.
And so I've prepared a statement. I'll just read it. That'll be easier. Tom Feiter has no idea what actually happened. Just a memo that Deborah Barrow wrote with her misrepresentations in an attempt to forever slander me. I was terminated because I did not share the same prosecutorial philosophy as Aramis Ayala, a person who ran on a platform of being lenient on criminals. I was a tough ASA and worked hard to prove my cases like I was taught to do. I didn't commit any ethics or discovery violations, and I've never been grieved. I was promoted quickly and given good performance reviews under the Ashton administration. My termination was completely unjustified and a wholly political decision. I've spoken to many experienced attorneys about the specifics, and none of them said I did anything wrong. Some people would rather believe a lie than ask about the actual truth. So moving on, I can tell you that I have run a criminal defense law practice, exclusively criminal defense, for almost the last 7 years. I practice all over Central Florida in about 14 or 15 counties. I practice in very conservative counties like Polk or Marion, and I practice in liberal counties like Hillsborough or Orange or Volusia. And as a private defense attorney, it's obviously beneficial to your client to have a relationship with the prosecutor. A lot of former prosecutors are private defense attorneys because we can put ourselves in their position and advocate for our clients. I was taught and I maintain that the prosecutor has a role. They advocate for the victim and the community. They are required to attempt to prove with admissible evidence beyond a reasonable doubt every crime charged. And that protects the victim and the community. The defense attorney is required to provide a vigorous and zealous defense. And what comes out is justice. It's hard to prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury. And it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. That's how we have justice.
Thank you. Did Jay or Julie, did either of you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll ask the next question. And we'll start with Mr. Hyman. If you're elected state attorney, what would be your philosophy on charging juveniles as adults?
I'm very glad you asked that because so I've been running since January of last year. Every single weekend, I go to public events like farmers markets. I go to parades. I go to 5Ks. I have coffee with people. And now I'm knocking on doors hours and hours and hours every day. So I've personally spoken to about 12,000 people. So I wanted to get the feedback of the community that I would be representing. And a lot of people are concerned about how juvenile crime is viewed, prosecuted, and talked about in this community. Now, we have a system in place. Well, not a system. We have a way to charge juveniles as adults when they're 16 or 17 and they're committing horrible crimes. When people behave like adults, they need to be treated like adults. However, we have a sentencing structure called youthful offender. And in other counties, they use youthful offender sentencing significantly more than we have in Orange and Osceola County. So when I'm state attorney, I intend to actually make sure that we protect victims when you have 16-year-old, 17-year-old kids who are in gangs, who are sticking guns in people's faces or breaking into their homes, destroying the sanctity of their peace and residence. And we need to make sure that those folks are held accountable for their actions. Monique Worrell had a reputation of, and it's true, I saw it personally as a defense attorney. Time and time again, juvenile court is viewed as a revolving door. It's viewed as that there's no punishment for kids who are committing crimes. We've got to stop only thinking about the kids and adults who are committing the crimes. We have got to think about the victims of the crimes. We've got to think about these kids are going back into school and all the other students who are following the rules, potentially depending upon what these juveniles are doing, are potentially at risk of getting into fights or being beaten up, as are the teachers. So we need to readjust our perspective on that and really focus on the victim. And that hasn't been happening under Monique Worrell or Aramis Ayala.
Thanks for your answer, Mr. Hyman. Mr. Feiter.
Yes, ma'am. There are certainly circumstances where it is appropriate to charge a juvenile as an adult, and then there are circumstances where it is not. Unlike Mr. Hyman, I'm a father. I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a son, and they're in the Orange County public school system. There are certainly situations that warrant, people being charged as an adult if they commit an adult crime. If there is a significant impact to a victim, that's one of those decisions that has to be made by a person with a lot of good life experience, which I have a lot more of, and that's something else that I bring to the table. So that is my answer to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I had a quick question for both of you. I wanted to ask about a little bit about resources. I know that many residents sometimes have language barriers or are not fluent in English to adequately participate in their own defense, and prosecutors often have to work with witnesses who don't speak English. In the courtroom, language barriers can be overcome, but do you believe that prosecutors have access to adequate resources for such things outside the courtroom? And I'll start with Mr. Feiter.
Of course. Mr. Reddick, I think our prosecutors have a lot of resources. Of course, you can never have too much or too many resources. I do speak Spanish. I am half Latino. So I do think it's important for our elected state attorney to be able to provide the tools necessary to the prosecutors that they need. And one of those is ability or access to interpreters, courtroom interpreters. There's also the language line. So one of the things I want to do when I'm elected state attorney is to build a team that is more reflective and inclusive of our community. And I know that Mr. Hyman disagrees with that philosophy, but I'll leave that alone. I think that with our growing Hispanic population, we do need access to resources like that. As far as the adequacy of what we have right now, I've never had a problem with seeing prosecutors access or having access to interpreters and things necessary to fully service our entire community.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Hyman, same question.
Yes, obviously within the state attorney's office, I think one thing that needs to happen as our community is changing and growing, there are certain languages that are more commonly spoken. It's not just Spanish, Vietnamese, Creole. I think that it would be beneficial to make sure that the state attorney's office has speakers in those various languages. Obviously, the state attorney's office has been a very diverse place for many administrations. When I worked there under Jeff Ashton, our office was extremely diverse. Many different backgrounds, race, creed, color, and that reflects the Orlando community. I grew up here, as did Mr. Feiter, and we both know that this is a very diverse community, and that's wonderful. And I've lived in other cities after high school, after graduating from Edgewater High School. Go Eagles! I went to college out of state and lived out of state for 20 years. And moved back about 10, 11 years ago. And the cities that I've lived in all across the country and the cities that I've visited have been very diverse and better for it. And so the state attorney's office should obviously provide whatever services that victims and witnesses need to be able to effectively communicate their story. I've heard since I've been running, it's almost like a magnet. I cannot tell you how many people have contacted me, victims who had cases under Monique Worrell and Aramis Ayala, who had their cases dropped and dismissed, and they didn't know why. Effectively, one of the policies that was a major problem was that they were dropping cases where much of the evidence was testimonial. So if there was not a lot of scientific evidence, they were dismissing more cases than should have been dismissed. They weren't charging on as many cases as should have been charged. And when they did have cases that resulted in convictions, the sentences we're far too lenient. And the way that we get around that is not get around that, but the way that we make sure that justice is achieved is we are able to communicate with our witnesses and our victims.
Thank you for that. I wanted to pivot over a little bit to discussion of technology. I know that some prosecutors and defense attorneys are experimenting with using technology, things like using AI to process documents, different things to research cases. Are there any uses of technology, either AI or other things that that this office should consider? And we'll start with Mr. Hyman on that one.
Sure, thanks for that question. I'm not a supporter of AI. I'm an old school type of guy. I want to be a traditional prosecutor, but not as traditional as some of the prosecutors who recently have only just adopted email, which is something that happens in other counties. However, I think that what needs to happen is that we need to bring into the office more civil law practitioners, trial lawyers that are experts in presenting interesting evidentiary issues to juries, right? A lot of medical malpractice cases have, charts and graphs and technology and ways to interact with a jury. And I think that's very important. But one of the biggest problems is not just about technology, it's getting back to basics. I've heard and I've experienced over and over and over, there's a major communication problem within the state attorney's office. They historically have not responded to calls as frequently as they should. They have not responded to emails as frequently as they should. I've experienced it, and I've heard time and time again, the excuse is just, oh, we don't have enough people here. Oh, we're overworked. Well, a lot of that is leadership, and it's about, I believe in efficiency. And one of the things that I want to do as state attorney is make sure that office is running efficiently and cutting the fat and making sure that the prosecutors know and have the high level of education in the law and criminal law. They need to be criminal law experts. So then they can identify when their cases are very strong, and they can identify where their cases are weak. And then the state attorney's office obviously has investigators. And if you have a close relationship with law enforcement, which I am a strong supporter of, the prosecutors can call law enforcement and say, hey, can you go get this witness statement? Can you go collect this surveillance footage? All of that relates to technology, but it really comes down to the human being and the human prosecutor. And they need to be trained in order to be professional lawyers. They need to respond to emails immediately. They need to at least say, I'll get back to you. They need to call people back. It's not just about speaking nicely to each other, which is very, very important, but it's running your docket efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Feiter, same question.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that. I'm a bit of a tech nerd. I love technology. The state attorney's office does need a huge tech update. And I have my office here running on the best technology available. If you don't keep up, you're going to be left behind. Unlike Mr. Hyman, there are ways to appropriately apply artificial intelligence. For example, with 7 attorneys working for us and 18 total employees, one of the things we're very concerned about are client complaints. So if a client mentions the word complaint, refund, something along those lines, it's flagged. And that email or that phone conversation will be sent up to the supervisor. That's a way we can use technology so that when we have a client, a victim or a survivor say something about being mad at the prosecutor or not following the law, or maybe it's something like a phone call to an assistant at the state attorney's office, and a lawyer is complaining about a prosecutor, I don't know, not turning over exculpatory evidence or trying to suppress evidence that should be suppressed, or that should not be suppressed, that should be turned over. Those phone calls are recorded and logged, and that will be sent up to the supervisor. That's a way we can implement technology in a very positive way. There's also a recording, I believe, of Mr. Hyman's termination. And he said earlier that it's a lie by me and all that's made up.
Mr. Feiter,
Yes,
I'm sorry, but we have asked you both to not talk about the other, and you did agree to that. And I hate to cut you off, or I hate to interrupt, but we did ask you for that, and we would appreciate it if you could
Of course.
stick to that. Thank you. Thank you.
I totally respect that. This does deal with technology, and I also believe that the voters should be as informed as possible about Mr. Hyman and his behavior. We can move on. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit to management philosophy as it pertains to your assistant state attorneys. And then we'll start with Mr. Feiter. What's the best measure of an assistant state attorney's performance, and what qualities should be rewarded and what should be discouraged?
Okay, no, great question. So one of the things I think I said earlier that we have to do when we lead an office like the state attorney's office is have a guiding coalition. And that means having the right leaders in the right places who are there on the merit. Okay, what that means is it's not somebody who is politically aligned. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or MPA. If you're the best person who can serve our community, I want you in that job. So there are a lot of people at the state, who might be concerned about that. That would never be an issue under my administration. What counts for me is honesty, hard work, and ethics. If I get complaints from the judiciary about one of the assistant state attorneys, that's a big problem for me. If I get a complaint from the public defender's office, that's a big problem for me. As state attorneys, we're kind of cloaked in a shroud of a higher ethical standard, just like police officers. If they get in trouble or if they commit a crime, they have to face criminal prosecution as well. They aren't exempt. But when you're a criminal prosecutor, it's such a heavy responsibility, and there are so many more ethical obligations that come along with it that I expect the leaders, not only the lowest assistant state attorney or the newest or the youngest, but it's even more important for the managers, ma'am, to set the right example and lead by example and demonstrate what that looks like. And that could be one of the ways I would expect is something that Bob Wesley did at the public defender's office, is he encouraged his attorneys to get board certified. So, and that would subject them to peer evaluation and judicial evaluation so that we can know objectively, who is a good, honest, and hardworking person. That's what I would expect of the assistant state attorneys.
Thanks for that answer. Mr. Hyman, what do you think is the best measure of assistant state attorney's performance?
Well, I mean, just like criminal cases, every case is evaluated based on its facts, but the best measure of an assistant state attorney is a hands-on review. I expect to be a very hands-on state attorney. When I was first hired there in 2014 under Jeff Ashton, the vast majority of my colleagues had worked under Lawson Lamar. And once Aramis Ayala was elected, from my observation, she selected a management team that was truly terrible. And they decided that they wanted to clamp down and over control every ASA. And one of the benefits of the Jeff Ashton administration and the Lawson Lamar administration was there were leaders and there were units, but there was a lot of personal responsibility and flexibility with the line ASAs. And that's something that private criminal defense attorneys have complained about for years, and I've seen it in other counties as well, when the supervisors don't give the line ASAs the freedom to negotiate and resolve cases to their best ability, then it frustrates the justice system. And I would say that Aramis Ayala and Monique Worrell created additional unnecessary levels of middle management that I intend to reduce, hence cutting the fat. I think that reducing some of those middle managers that are getting paid, over $100,000, I can redistribute some of those salaries to the county court attorneys and encourage them to stay. That helps with turnover because, it's not just that, yes, line ASAs are getting paid more now than ever before, but the cost of living is greater than ever before. So we have to look at how much these people have to pay for rent. How much do these people have to pay for their law school payments? We need to keep people there, and we don't need to be spending limited resources from the state attorney's office on certain high-level managers who aren't in the courtroom doing the court work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You'll definitely find, both of you, a sympathetic audience on the issue of income versus living expenses. I wanted to ask about something that we've seen spreading across Florida for a couple of decades now. Court systems that operate specialty, also known as problem-solving courts. There are veterans courts, drug courts, all kinds of, even baby court. And they focus on helping people in special circumstances overcome factors that get them in trouble with the law. Without the state attorney's office participation, these courts can't operate. Do you support the concept of specialty courts? And if so, are there additional categories of cases that you think would be appropriate for a problem-solving approach? And let's start with Mr. Hyman.
Thank you for that question. So as I mentioned, I've spoken to probably 12,000 people. So I've heard directly from folks. As a prosecutor, I can honestly say that I was one of the leading prosecutors sending people to drug court and sending people to mental health court. A lot of the practice back then was to put people on probation and have them on drug offender probation within the regular court. And what that means is that if someone violates probation, then they're treated just like a normal violation. And with one violation, they could be potentially resentenced up to the maximum. So I thought that we should be sending people to drug court, which inherently understands that some people are dealing with troubles and sometimes there's people mess up. And so that was something that I specifically even went to drug court and I spoke to people, and I was a real advocate of that. Mental health court is not utilized enough. It needs to really be improved. Veterans court is very important. I strongly support veterans. I have many people in my life who are veterans and have been who are veterans. And it's very important to acknowledge the fact that veterans have unique issues when they come back from service abroad. Obviously, in the last 25 years, our country has been in multiple significant wars in the Middle East. And that has an impact. And I was born in 1976, so I grew up in the 80s. And I remember how the country dealt with Vietnam veterans at that point in time, which was abysmal. So I think, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think we need a homelessness court. We need to deal with the homelessness issue. Absolutely. It's one of the biggest problems in our community. And people that are homeless, some of them have drug problems, some of them have mental health problems, but some of them just have poverty problems, and maybe not just homelessness, but just poverty court or something. But homelessness is an issue that really needs to be addressed in new, innovative ways. But that doesn't mean we need a carrot and a stick. We can't just give only carrots, and that's what Monique Worrell and Aramis Ayala were trying to do.
Thank you. Mr. Feiter, same question.
Of course. So we're all human, and my life experience and my core beliefs tell me that we all make mistakes. And just because you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that it has to impact the rest of your life. So, I deal with clients every day here in my office. I deal with our team members and their families, and I see how everyday, good, honest people can make mistakes. So depending on the circumstances of the case, there will be instances where diversionary programs are appropriate, like the pretrial diversion program, like veterans court, mental health court does need to be used more. I absolutely support these diversionary type programs, but I think they should be conditioned. And a few conditions are that the offender accepts responsibility, that they express remorse, and that they demonstrate an ability to become, again, a law-abiding member of our society who contributes to our community. Now, that's not to say that we should ignore violent career criminals or habitual felony offenders. People who are career criminals need to be taken off the street so that they can't hurt us, our children, our families, or our businesses anymore.
Thank you very much. Okay, I had one more question before we move into closing statements. We have gone a little long, but it's been really interesting. after Governor Ron DeSantis removed State Attorney Monique Worrell from office, several leading justice, several justice leaders, I should say, expressed their dismay and concern, in that they said that they were worried that the governor was showing deep disrespect for prosecutorial discretion, and that they were worried that the precedent that her removal and the previous removal of the Hillsborough State Attorney, Andrew Warren, set. In addition, the Sentinel investigated some of the claims that the governor cited against Worrell when he suspended her and found that they were not supported or that her office was not at fault in some of those statistics. With that information, much of which came out obviously after the governor acted, do you think that what he did was right? Not just in this circumstance, but in the circumstance of suspending a duly elected official who had not been accused of any crimes or any, anything that would normally merit that. I would like to start with Mr. Feiter on that one.
Yes, Ms. Fluker, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have answered this question by several reporters or journalists now about whether or not I agree with the governor's decision to remove Ms. Worrell. And I always qualify it with saying, yes, I may support it if it was founded and if it was, if she was being derelict of duty and failing to follow the law. I think what's most important to understand is that the prosecutor's office is an executive office where we are to execute the laws. We are not legislators. We are law enforcement officers. So if we step outside of those bounds and try to use this as a political platform or something like that, okay, there may be circumstances where, it is appropriate for the governor to step in and remove them from office. I don't know why the governor did that. I've read, of course, some of the allegations brought against Ms. Worrell. I think it's a dangerous precedent, and I think it should only be done in the most extreme of circumstances. I am concerned, too, with the appointment of Andrew Bain, who is apparently an NPA. He was a Democrat, but he's never been a Republican, and the governor is now endorsing this person, Andrew Bain, who somehow signed 2 documents under oath under penalties of perjury that he intended to run as a Republican when he has never been a Republican. So what scares me about this whole thing is the idea that the governor may be overreaching and trying to exceed the scope of even his authority and be more authoritarian, which is absolutely un-American and inappropriate. I'm also concerned with the actions that he and his cronies are implementing with regard to following a spoils system as opposed to a merit-based system, which I am more in favor of. I do not think positions of authority like this should go to somebody just because they kissed the ring of the governor. It should be earned on the merits, and it should be somebody who is independent and not in bed with the governor or the people that have power for at least the next 2 years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hyman, same question.
Thank you for asking that. I completely agree with the governor's decision and believe it's wholly and totally lawful. Here's the thing. Every governor in our recent history for quite some time has had the power to remove an executive under certain circumstances. It's in the Constitution. And Monique Worrell's entire platform has nothing to do with what she did in office. She's not saying I did X, Y, Z, and that was great. She's not talking about what she's planning on doing in 2025 through 2028. Her entire platform is the governor removed me and that wasn't fair. I will tell you that the power is within the Florida Constitution for the governor to remove. Governors have removed various executive positions all over Florida. And the power being in the Constitution means that power was ratified by the people. So Monique Worrell is going around saying that she was, it's against the will of the people, when in fact, the will of the people, a larger portion of people had to vote to ratify that power into the Constitution. So in fact, the people are more represented by the governor exercising that right. Monique Worrell, because of the closed primary system, only was able to be voted in by Democrats effectively. So she had 4 Democratic primary opponents, and there were, a small number of people who voted. She got about 40% of the Democrats. And then in the general, she ran against an NPA who's a great lawyer, and he's a friend of mine, but he didn't have a lot of funding. He didn't have party support. And most people vote party line. Most people vote DDDDD or RRRRR. And in that general election, she's saying, I was elected 66%, but most Republicans skipped, it's likely most Republicans NPAs skipped that particular race. So of all the registered voters, she only received 4% of the votes of registered voters. So yes, I agree with the governor's decision. She was not doing her job. The power to have prosecutorial discretion is there on a case-by-case basis, but she applied it to an entire range of case types, and that's death by 1,000 cuts. I saw it every week when I was in court. Thank you.
I really appreciate y'all taking the time to sit down and talk with us. We did want to very quickly remind our readers, the Orlando Sentinel will be endorsing in this race, and obviously in the November primary, in the November general election as well. But we don't want you to just take our endorsement as the only word. There is a lot of information available on both of these candidates. They both have websites, active social media accounts. We will of course have our excellent Sentinel coverage of this race, and so take a look for yourself. Decide which of these candidates for our Republican viewers best matches your values, and then carry that consideration through to the general election in November. And we really hope that you take this as a jumping off point to consider which of these candidates you want to represent you in the state attorney's office. With that, I am going to ask both of our candidates to make a brief closing statement that just your pitch as to why voters should choose you. And let's start with Mr. Feiter.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Tom Feiter, and I'm running for state attorney to put safety first. What I mean by that is I want to ensure the safety of our community and ensure that our children and our businesses can thrive here. Being elected the state attorney means being the top prosecutor, the top law enforcement officer for over 2 million people. That's a big responsibility. The state attorney is responsible for prosecuting crime that happens anywhere in Orange or Osceola County, whether that's at Disney World, on the street, or in your home. It's a big responsibility, and I'm up for it. I'm a family man with 3 young children and an amazing wife, Erica. Our children go to school here. We own 2 homes and a commercial building in downtown Orlando, so we kind of have a big personal stake in our community. I bring a lot of important experience to this role. I'm a former prosecutor, and I've also worked as a defense attorney. I built a successful law firm from the ground up. I've achieved board certification by the Florida Bar. I employ 18 people in my private law practice, and I currently also serve in the United States Army JAG Corps Reserve, where I supervise and manage 16 soldiers in a legal operations detachment. So I have experience leading organizations and many people. In the Army, not only have I been formally trained on leadership, but in my many years as an officer, I have seen good leaders and bad ones. Those have been invaluable experiences for me, and I've learned from them. I bring all that experience with me. I'm committed to leading with integrity and setting the right example for the next generation of lawyers. My military service and my ability to speak Spanish enable me to serve our diverse community, which includes a growing population of Latinos and veterans. As a business owner, I also understand that crime and crime rates can have a direct impact on private enterprise. I don't want businesses downtown to close. I want them to open up. So I'm running because I'm the most qualified person to lead this office. and because I'm dedicated to ensuring that our community remains a safe place for us all to live, work, and raise our families. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Hyman, give us your pitch.
Sure. My name is Seth Hyman, and I am a Republican candidate for state attorney here in Orange and Osceola counties. My family has lived in this community for over 45 years, since 1978. I love this community, and that's why I'm running. I served this community as an assistant state attorney from 2014 to 2017, and for the last almost 7 years, I've exclusively run a criminal defense law practice. Now, we need to make sure that this next election gets the attention it deserves. It's pivotal. There is significant danger to the community with a re-election of Monique Worrell. We need to depoliticize the state attorney's office, and I intend to do that. I intend to run a traditional prosecutor's office. We need to make sure that people who are committing crimes are held accountable for their actions, that the focus is on the victim and the community. And unlike Monique Worrell and Aramis Ayala, who almost completely focus on the defendant, that's not the job of the prosecutor. If somebody sticks a gun in your face, you're not wondering, did they have a bad childhood? You're wondering, why is this person threatening to end my life? Now, there's an important place for social work in our community. There are many nonprofits in this community that should be funded fully, but the state attorney's office is not a social work agency. It's a criminal justice agency. So under Seth Hyman, the state attorney's office will have a very close relationship with law enforcement, will support law enforcement, will take part in training law enforcement. But we need to reflect what the people want. The people feel that they're being neglected by the state attorney's office. I hear countless questions about crimes of fraud against the elderly, intellectual property theft, and people getting their cars broken into. Their homes broken into, the sanctity of their home. They'll never feel safe in the future when they go to sleep. We cannot allow that. I've heard so many victims of crime saying that the state attorney's office dropped the ball. We need to understand that people who have businesses don't deserve to have folks steal all their inventory and put them out of business. We have to institute tough sentences so the people that can't change their behavior are removed from the community, so the people that are following the rules can live a happy life, and the people that can change their behavior through deterrence will, when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, and this race, once again, open to all registered Republicans in Orange and Osceola counties, and will be on the August 20th ballot. And the winner will move forward into a three-way general election in November. I wish you both the best of luck, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.